Hey guys, I spent the last 5 months going through Peter Attia's $2,500 early program. In this video, I'll cover what the program includes, the biggest things I've learned, and who I think will get the most value from it. If you're not familiar with Dr. Attia, he hosts a health podcast called The Drive, and he practices out of Austin, Texas. To be a real patient of his is reported to cost $150,000 a year. So at only $2,500, his online program is a more cost-effective way to get the Peter Attia experience. The program consists of 12 modules. The first 6 are about defining your health goals and identifying risks, and the final 6 are tactics, the lifestyle changes you can make to improve different areas of your health. It's deliberately in that order because you need to know where to direct your energy based on what's likely to impact you in your life, which may be completely different from someone else. The program is a combination of video content made specifically for this program, existing content on either his website or clips taken from his podcast, and takeaway exercises which you can complete at home. To be clear, this is not a personalized program. It is more like a $2,500 online course, and there is no direct contact between you and anyone at Dr. Attia's clinic. One of the very first things he addresses is that this program is not promising to help you live to 150. Instead, the focus is on a higher quality of life and extending that by around 10 years. That may not seem like a lot, but he has 2 exercises to help drive this home. Firstly, the timeline exercise, writing down the current ages of your family and then mapping it out in 10-year increments. The focus is drawn to future generations and what he calls the non-linear effect. This is where an extra 10 years is a relatively small addition to your lifetime, but could mean more than double the time spent with grandkids or great-grandkids. The second is the marginal decade exercise, describing in detail what you want to be physically capable of in your final 10 years of life. This might include keeping up with hobbies, traveling, or more simple goals like being able to live independently without going into care. These 2 combine to be your motivation for the rest of the program and the rest of your life. As the famous quote goes, "He who has a strong why for which to live can bear almost any how." Another highlight for me was his explanation of the difference between objective, strategy, and tactics, and how 90% of what you hear on podcasts is tactics. I cannot tell you how many hours of podcast episodes I've saved myself from listening to once I understood this approach. Your objective is to square the longevity curve, increasing the number of years in good health until it closely matches total lifespan, meaning you're also minimizing the time spent in poor health. For reference, the current healthcare system does the opposite. It only catches you when you're really sick and draws out what is potentially a lot of suffering at the end of your life. Your strategy, as he explains it, is to live longer without disease. Studies of centenarians show that they live just as long as the rest of us with disease, meaning their long lifespan comes from spending longer without disease. Your tactics are what most people are bombarded with every day when they're trying to learn about health. Often contradictory, it's your nutrition advice, exercise, sleep, and medications. When it comes to strategy, he uses a very helpful Titanic analogy. The idea is that you're steering the Titanic and the hazards to your health are icebergs. In real terms, it means, depending on visibility, various threats to your health will pop up and you have a certain amount of time to react. Your reaction is the tactics, improving sleep, cleaning up diet, exercising more, and the less time you have until a collision, the harder you'll need to turn the ship, meaning the more aggressively you'll need to implement them if you want to survive. Implementing these tactics is not as straightforward as it might initially seem because some lifestyle changes may increase the risk of another health complication, which is why having an overall strategy in mind is really important. Identifying your icebergs can be done by assessing your genetic risks and by using both non-invasive and invasive measurements. An example of each would be known diseases that run in your family, risks that come from having an unfavorable waist to height ratio, and assessing your heart health with a blood test. You're asked to complete a family history that includes siblings, parents, aunts, uncles, and grandparents. He notes that DNA testing is useful, but not a substitute for family history, as most diseases are polygenic, meaning they involve more than one gene, despite the headline-grabbing single genes like BRCA for breast cancer and ApoE for Alzheimer's disease. The next 2 modules cover the main causes of death, initially displayed as a series of bar charts split by age, which he refers to as death bars. They show that younger age groups mainly die from suicide, overdoses, and transport accidents. Cancer is the top killer of those aged 50 to 79 before heart disease claims the most in the over 80s, with a steady rise in brain-related disorders like dementia. He includes a really in-depth look at heart disease, where he notes the high proportion of cardiac events happening in the under 65s and also the prevalence in women. I'm certainly not alone in thinking it was more of a male problem, but he quoted a statistic that 10 times more women will die of heart disease than of breast cancer. For cancer, it could be simplified to a single rule: catch it early. The danger with cancer is that it metastasizes, meaning it spreads to other areas of your body, at which point the odds of survival are very low. Module 4 addresses the other of the 4 horsemen he references in his book. While there isn't much that can be done to reverse neurodegenerative disease, exercise is the best tool for prevention, with sleep, nutrition, and stress also playing a role. He also talks about the ApoE4 gene, which, while not deterministic, does carry huge increases in the risk of Alzheimer's disease. You get 1 copy from each of your parents, and there are 3 variants, meaning 6 combinations in total. Looking at the risk relative to the most common variant, known as 3-3, you can see that having at least 1 ApoE4 allele increases risk, and an ApoE2 allele is protective. The final horseman is metabolic disease, said to be the foundation of the other 3, and it affects a large proportion of the Western world. Alongside that is metabolic syndrome, defined as meeting at least 3 of the following criteria, which, as you can see, are relatively easy to test for. This is an indication of insulin resistance, which may go on to develop into type 2 diabetes. So together, modules 1 to 4 highlight the main risks to your health and help you get an understanding of which of those are most prevalent in your family and therefore require the most immediate attention. Back in module 1, he asked you to gather your labs, and in module 5, these are then reviewed. He has a spreadsheet where you can input your values and judge where you are in comparison to his relatively strict reference ranges, highlighting anywhere where you're not optimal. Since he can't personally review your labs, he puts together a series of case studies, which are videos featuring an actor playing the part of the patient. And within each video, the idea is that you'll find at least something in their medical history of relevance to you. There's also a helpful labs cheat sheet to understand more about the individual biomarkers and why he considers each to be worthy of testing. In the final module of this first section, he outlines the most common types of cancer, the current state of national screening programs, and what a more comprehensive screening program might look like for someone at his practice. It does come with caveats, not only the high cost of some of these tests, but also the dangers of false positives. He explains the imperfect nature of screening tools and how a combination of sensitivity, specificity, and population prevalence can determine how useful a test is. This is really important to understand, and it explains why they don't just roll out national screening programs for everything. The more prevalent a cancer is in a given population, the more likely a test is to correctly identify cancer, which reduces the number of false positives, where people may be needlessly worried and put through follow-up testing. More broadly, that means if your personal risk of cancer is low, the chances of you receiving a false positive relative to a true positive are much higher. So choosing what to screen for will depend on how likely it is that you have a certain cancer based on age, sex, genetics, and lifestyle factors, as well as your willingness to accept false positives. After working through the first 6 modules, a few things really stood out, both good and bad. If I didn't have children, I'm not sure how motivating I'd find the opening exercise. He does address this in the follow-up content, but I think it's quite short-sighted of him to start with an exercise which, for some people, particularly those who wanted children but didn't or couldn't have them, would potentially be very demotivating. I'd also question how well thought out the idea is of squaring longevity curve. Anyone who's ever lost someone abruptly will know how difficult it is, and while you don't want that person to suffer, a steadier decline allows you to really appreciate that person and savor every moment with them. I'm not sure going from peak health to death in the shortest time possible is best for those I leave behind. On a more positive note, the family history exercise was very enlightening. In my personal history, there is very little cancer, only late onset dementia, and a fair amount of heart disease. He speaks about your efforts being a finite resource. So for me, that means I should direct a lot of my energy towards prevention of heart disease if I want to extend my health span. In general, the lab section was really insightful. It captured more of my attention because it was interactive, since I had my own lab results in front of me while watching the videos. I was glad I saw the cancer screening module when I did. His recommendations start at age 40 and I'll be 39 next year, whereas most national health services won't start screening people until age 50. He makes a persuasive case for regular colonoscopies, but otherwise leaves it up to you to weigh up your own personal risks. Overall, the first half gives you a solid framework to understand your risks and decide where your time and energy are best spent. The second half of the program focuses on the individual tactics you can use to reach your health goals. Each module includes expert advice and finishes with a practical worksheet you can use to assess where you currently are with each of the tactics. He caveats this section by pointing out that tactics are always changing, and as new evidence comes out, we must adapt our approach, which is why it's so important to have a clear objective and strategy in mind. Dr. Matt Walker, author of Why We Sleep, is the expert for the sleep module. He discusses all things sleep, including the science of sleep, how to improve your sleep, as well as touching on supplements, medication, and wearables. I've heard him on a few podcasts, and the information here is nicely condensed, focusing a lot on actionable changes that can be made. If you aren't prioritizing your sleep, reading Why We Sleep should scare you into taking it seriously. Dr. Attia presents the nutrition module himself, which, if you've listened to his podcast for any length of time, you will know is one of his least favorite topics. After picking apart epidemiological studies and food frequency questionnaires, he condenses everything into 10 principles of good nutrition, including guidance on a target protein intake and what foods and drinks you should limit. In contrast to nutrition, exercise is probably his favorite topic, and this is a tactic he spends a lot of time on, covering 2 modules, theory and practice. He discusses the importance of VO2 max, a measure of cardiovascular fitness, and focuses on the decline in physical capacity with age, which really hits home with graphs like this. Strength follows a similar decline to VO2 max, and through a process called backcasting, the opposite of forecasting, you're asked to work backwards from that end state and appreciate how much stronger and fitter you need to be today if you're going to meet those goals. Module 10 covers exercise practice, including common chronic injuries and a series of 13-week training programs in a downloadable PDF for the 4 main types of client he sees in his practice. The resources include an exercise library with instructional videos of over 100 exercises that appear across the various programs. The penultimate module covers medication and supplements, again, not giving out advice on which supplements to take, instead offering a framework which you can apply to any supplement you're taking. He does offer a few worked examples of mainstream medications, including statins, TRT, HRT, as well as metformin and rapamycin. As with his book, he finishes with emotional health, which, unlike everything that came before it, doesn't have to decline with age. The 3 pillars are emotional regulation, health of personal relationships, and a sense of purpose. And throughout the module, you're directed towards DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, as a solution. Overall, there is a lot of content here. The suggested cadence is 1 module per month, meaning you'd spend a full year going through this program. I chose the more intensive route, covering a module every 1 to 2 weeks while taking plenty of notes. In total, it's around 27 hours of in-program content, increasing to 60 hours once you factor in all the linked articles and podcast clips, and an additional 200 hours of optional long-form podcast episodes he recommends listening to. Since launching the early program, I noticed his website has been reorganized into topics, which quite closely mirror the layout of this course. So if you use his site and regularly listen to his podcast, there's very little that this program actually adds. What is unique to early are the 15 at-home activities, which range from half an hour filling out sleep questionnaires to much more involved exercises like gathering your family history. This all feeds into your longevity risk assessment, a document to be updated every 6 to 12 months. So, is it worth $2,500? That amount of money means different things to different people. But aside from that, the value that you derive will be directly related to the type of mindset you have when presented with a program like this. If you're going to complete all the exercises, update the longevity risk assessment every 6 months, and overhaul your lifestyle to follow his best practice, then you're absolutely going to get good value in the gains you make to your overall health. If you think what an extra month in good health might be worth to you, let alone 10 years, it starts to look like a very reasonable sum of money. However, if you are like most people, the ones who tell themselves, this is the year I'll get healthy before falling back into old habits, if you only make health-related purchases during those infrequent surges in motivation, then it's going to deliver as much value as the exercise bike gathering dust in the corner of your garage. Something else to address is that people online questioned whether the early program was a bit of a cash grab, and it's hard to argue against that. It doesn't seem like something he was particularly passionate about creating, more like an experiment to see if people would pay for a structured version of his existing content. That becomes clearer when you zoom out. The podcast, the book, the redesigned website, and projects like his preventative medicine company, Biograph, and 10 Squared, a private training program specifically for the centenarian decathlon with memberships starting from $75,000 a year. He's certainly targeting the high end of the market, so if $2,500 is a real stretch, then you're likely not the intended audience and you're better off continuing with the free resources online. The last thing I'll say is that with the rise of AI and personalized health coaching, a static online course like this may not age that well. We could be 5 or 10 years away from having Peter Attia-like knowledge layered upon our complete medical history and complemented by our sequenced DNA, regular blood testing, and real-time biometrics from our wearables. That being said, if you can't wait that long and you're in the market for a well-organized, high-level overview of the Attia philosophy and you have the discipline, desire, and budget to act on it, then I could see this being a worthwhile investment. Thanks for watching.